Welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to discuss about NPV application and decision making. So there are like problems where we use the NPV to arrive at a decision making. So we'll look at where are the instances where we can apply the NPV. So NPV can be applied and we get a solution at lease or buy decisions or asset replacement decision or equivalent annual cost method in capital rationing. So these are the instances where we apply NPV. So we'll start from lease or buy. So we'll have a general understanding about what is a operating lease and a finance lease. So before discussing about lease, we'll see like who are the people involved. So one person is called as a lessor, who is the owner of the asset. And there's another person called as lessee, who pays rent to use the asset. So we'll start discussing about the types of lease. So now we look at operating lease, a lease in which all risks and rewards related to ownership remain with the lessor for the leased asset is called as an operating lease. So all the risks and rewards refers to any income produced by the asset or any damage that occurs to the asset or have to be borne by the owner of the asset, the lessor. Okay, is called as an operating lease. In this type of lease, the asset is returned by the lessee after using it for the agreed upon lease term. So there's another type of lease called as finance lease. In financial lease, the risks and rewards related to ownership of the asset being leased are transferred to the lessee. Okay, so here the income generated by the asset and any damages caused by the asset have to be borne by the lessee or the person who pays the rent. So now we'll consider the full difference between an operating lease and a finance lease. See, the ownership lies with the lessor. The risk and rewards related to the asset is with the lessor. The purchase option, there's no question of anything called as a purchase option in operating lease. The expenses have to be borne by the lessor. Any maintenance cost, if it's a small expense, it will be taken care by the lessee. But any large expense has to be taken care by the lessor. The tax benefit that is accrued here is the rental expense paid by the lessee, that he gets the tax benefit. Any depreciation on the asset, then that will be like taken by the lessor. In terms of financial lease, ownership, there's a transfer option which is available at the end of the lease period, where the lessee can become the owner at the end of the lease period. The risk and rewards related to the asset is with the lessee, not the lessor. There is a purchase option. The lessee has a purchase option, so he has the right to purchase the asset at the end of the lease period. Expenses borne, all expenses have to be borne by the lessee. Maintenance cost, all expenses again have to be borne by the lessee. Tax benefit, the interest and depreciation which is generated by the machine will be like taken by the lessee. Okay, so the lessor does not have any tax benefit. There are some important points when we are trying to solve a lease or a buy problem. So normally we have to assume operational lease versus buying decision. Choose the option which gives you the least financing cost. Always use the after-tax cost of borrowing as a discount rate. We assume for comparability purpose that the asset is bought on a loan. Interest rate payments are not shown as they are inherent in the discount rate itself. So these points are valid. So these points have to be followed when you're trying to a lease or a buy problem. So there are some more additional important points. If the asset is bought, the buyer is responsible for the initial investment, the tax allowable depreciation or tax benefit, and also for the maintenance cost. If leased, the lessee is eligible for the lease payments and the tax benefits for lease payments. So these are the cash inflows and outflows that you have to take while considering the purchase of an asset or the lease of an asset. If leased, the lessor is eligible for the lease income, the tax to be paid on the lease income, and any tax allowable depreciation which is available on the asset. So we'll have a quiz here. In relation to an operating lease, which of the following statement is correct? All the risks and rewards of ownership are transferred to the lessee. This is a financial lease. The asset and legal lease obligation will be recorded in the statement of financial position. Again, this is a financial lease. The lease period will cover almost all of the leased assets' useful economic life. Again, this is a financial lease point. The lessor will be responsible for repairs and maintenance of the leased asset. So this is the right one. Okay. So this represents the operating lease. Let's see the answer. The answer is D. So we look at what is an asset replacement decision or an equivalent annual cost method. Asset replacement decision is used when a company has to choose an machinery which has a different lifetime. For example, there might be a machine which has a 2 years life or a 3 year life or a 5 year life. So which uh, which machine has to be chosen, because each machine will have its own maintenance cost and their scrap value will also differ. So each machine will have a different maintenance cost and a scrap value. In that terms, which machine has to be bought? Okay, the overall cost of operating the machine should be low. So that is the concept here. So we can look at the steps. First, we have to calculate the NPV of each strategy or replacement cycle. So for each of the machine, we have to compute an NPV. Calculate the EAC for each of the strategy. So the EAC works like this: NPV divided by the annuity factor. So divide by the annuity factor, you will get an answer. Okay, you will get an answer. Choose the strategy with the lowest EAC. Okay, so what we are trying to do is to reduce the total cost of operating a asset. So we have to choose the answer which has the lowest EAC. So this is about the asset replacement decision. So similar to asset replacement decision, we can also work out a equivalent annual benefit. So again, in this option, we have to do NPV for each of the options or strategy. Divide the NPV by annuity factor and we get the EAB. As this is a benefit, we have to choose the highest EAB. Capital rationing is the process of allotting the capital expenditure when capital is scarce. So what happens here is the company does not have sufficient amount of capital to allocate to its projects. For example, there are like three projects, A, B and C, and A requires 1500 as investment, B requires 2000 and C requires 3000, but the total availability of capital with the company is something like 2000. So it cannot choose all the projects, right? Because choosing all the projects, the company would need something like 6500, but the company has an availability of only 2000 as its capital. Okay, so what happens is it can't take all the projects which are available to it. When capital is limited in supply, raising capital is not easy. Then the company will have to pick and choose between investments and let go others even if they are favorable. Okay, so with 2000 capital, the company can easily select A or B, but it cannot select the option, the project C. So that is the problem. This is done by imposing conditions and limitations on the way capital is applied on different investment opportunities. Okay, so what happens is the company has to create some kind of a priority method based upon which the capital is to be allocated. So the company does not have enough capital, it's because of two reasons. One is called as hard capital rationing and the other is called as a soft capital rationing. So we'll see the reasons for the both. Hard capital rationing or external rationing occurs when the company faces problems in raising funds in the external market. So what happens here is the company has an availability to invest in projects, but it cannot raise the capital from the market. Okay, so that is the reason. This can lead to shortage of capital to finance for the new projects in the company. So what are the reasons for hard capital rationing? Sometimes the company might be a startup firm, so they couldn't raise funds, or the capital market is in a recession or a poor position, so the company cannot raise funds from the market. The company has a poor management or a track record. The lenders, the debenture holders are restricting the company to raise more finance, or the economy is in recession, okay, or the cost of finance is so high that the company cannot raise capital. So these can be the reasons for hard capital rationing. These reasons occur because of external factors and mostly not about the internal company. So we look at the soft capital rationing. Soft capital rationing or internal rationing is caused due to internal policies of the company. The company may voluntarily have certain restrictions that limit the amount of funds available for investment projects. So what happens here is the company has money. For example, they have three projects to invest: A, B, C. So A requires 1500, B requires 2000, and C requires 3000. So A was proposed by the sales manager, B was proposed by the production manager, and C was referred by the HR manager. Okay, so three managers have come with different proposal, investment proposal. So what happens is the company, even though it has 10,000 as capital and it can invest in all of these projects, still it limits its total capital to something like 2,000. Okay, so why does it limit it to 2,000? The answer is it wants to invest only in the best of the projects. So each of the managers have to pitch into the senior managers saying why their project is best, and they have to convince them only the project which is like very convincing and looks like very promising, that would be like selected. So in this case, C has the HR manager should not like propose for 3,000 because the total limit itself is 2,000. So this project will be immediately cancelled. Out of A and B, whichever is like viable enough, that will be like selected. So they can go with sales manager's proposal to the sales manager's investment proposal. So that's how internal capital rationing works. So the reasons for soft capital rationing are making investment ideas to compete each other. So the managers like sales manager, production manager, and the HR manager have to compete with each other to produce the best investment proposal. Company does not want to increase its debt or equity. So rather than trying to get the money from the market, they are restricting to raise the capital. So these are the reasons for soft capital rationing. So when a soft, whether it's going to be a soft capital rationing or a hard capital rationing, okay, when you do a numerical sum, the sums are of three types. So one is called as the divisible method. So assume that there is a project A which requires 1500, B requires an investment of 2000, and C requires an investment of 3000. Okay, so these projects are divisible in nature. What is divisible? Divisible means you can also invest in a part of it. Okay, so it's not that you have to invest only 100% of your money. You can even invest even 50% of your money, or even like something like 10% of your money. So that is what is called as a divisible project. So we look at the steps to solve a divisible project's capital rationing problem. So the first step is called as profitability index. Okay, profitability takes the NPV as a numerator and the amount of investment as the denominator. The aim is to maximize the NPV earned per invested in projects where the projects are divisible in nature, that is, they can be taken in part. Projects cannot, however, be undertaken more than once. Okay, so you should not like take A two times. Two times of A is not like available, or three times of B cannot be available. So how do we work out the sum? First, we try to calculate the PI for each of the projects. Then we rank the projects. Then we allocate the funds. We'll apply these steps in a problem and we could see the answer. So the second method is called as a capital rationing indivisible projects. The projects are not indivisible. Either you have to invest 0% of your money, or you can invest only 100% of your money. So it is not like partly investable. So for solving indivisible projects, what you have to do, you have to work out something called the trial and error method. If a project is indivisible, it must be done in its entirety or not at all. Either it's going to be 100% or 0%. Where projects cannot be done in part, the optimal combination can only be found through trial and error. Okay, so if a problem states that the projects are indivisible in nature, then you have to use trial and error method. There is also something called as a mutually exclusive projects. So sometimes the taking on of projects will preclude the taking on of another. We'll have an example. We'll take 5 projects. So A, B, C, D and E. Okay. The problem states that there's a mutual exclusivity between A and E. That is, if you select A, you should not select E. If you select E, you should not select A. Okay. So either A or E can be selected, but both of them cannot be selected in a particular problem. Okay. So that is what we call as mutual exclusivity. If you have a mutual exclusivity problem, then you have to first work out the PI method, then use the trial and error method. Okay. Then only you will be like getting the answer. So we look at what are the questions that have appeared in the past exams. In the past exams, we have got questions like capital rationing twice. So decided to limit investment funds, that's a capital rationing question. And here it is like directly given as capital rationing. So two times questions have occurred from capital rationing chapter. This chapter can also be like asked in section A or section B also. So thank you very much for watching this video. We'll meet in the next video.